Hi everyone, welcome to another instalment of Train Your Dog Month. It's day 2 and today I'm going to be joined by Louise from the APDT. And Louise is a dog trainer and behaviourist based in mid-Essex. And she's going to be talking to us tonight about why you should train your dog and also why you should train your dog with positive reinforcement. So I'm just going to bring her on. There she is.
Hi everybody.
Can everyone hear us, see us? All right, if you let us know in the comments, can you hear us and see okay? Maybe. We've got a little thumbs up reaction, so hopefully they can. I'm going to hand over to you, Louise, so that you can get on with your little presentation if you want to share your slides.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Right, see if I can the right buttons and hopefully you can see that okay.
Yeah, that looks good to me.
Awesome. So I thought I would share this picture, and any photographers among you think, what on earth is this sort of picture? You can't even see all the dogs, but this was me walking my dogs the other week when we had so much snow and ice here in mid-Essex this was. And I thought if there was any picture that said 1,000 words about why we should train our dogs, it was walking under these conditions with 3 dogs. They probably weigh about 80 odd kilos combined. And they're walking nicely for me. Their leads are loose. They're all on a track as well. As you can see, their noses are down. And I thought this was a good picture to show the benefits of training your dog and why we should train our dogs, because I want to be able to walk them. We had snow for it's a good week, I think, so I couldn't just not take them out for a walk. So it was nice to have done the training so that my dogs walk nicely on the lead and I can take them out under these conditions and not completely fall over on my butt. So this was one of the pictures I thought I would share today. It's a big reason as to why we should train our dogs and why it is a good idea. And loose lead walking is, of course, one of the most common things that we often get called out about. So the other thing to think about with our dogs is that society has a lot of expectations for our dogs. And we live in a human society with human expectations. So for our dogs to live in harmony with us in this human society that is really set up to benefit humans, we need to help our dogs and we need to help them with those expectations for what we want from our dogs living with us. And that leads me on to talk about something that is really obvious, but sometimes something that we often forget, which is that our dogs are a completely different species to us. And we really need to have that understanding that our dogs are a different species and help them understand in a nice way what we want from our dogs. So we need to try and remember if they're digging up the garden, it's a normal dog behaviour. Of course, we don't necessarily want them to do that, but if we can provide them somewhere where they can dig, or a sandpit or something like that, then it's giving them an outlet to be a dog. So we really need to think about what it means for our dogs to be a dog and help them do those behaviours in an appropriate way. So this is where our training and stuff is really going to be important, thinking about that species difference and having that understanding. Reading their body language too, of course, but that's a whole another lecture. So when we do train our dogs and when we want to help them understand the behaviours that we want them to perform, if you like, or to do in our homes and when we're out walking them, to walk nicely on the lead or come back when we call them, it's really nice to be able to teach them that in a way that uses something really positive. So training using positive reinforcement is something that APDT trainers do. And this is where we're giving the dog something nice just after a behaviour that we like, so that they're more likely to repeat that behaviour. So reward-based training where we're giving the dog something good. So this is where we want them to be doing a behaviour that we like. We might give them something like a little piece of cheese or something like that, and then they're more likely to do that behaviour. So for an example, if I've got the dog's food bowl and I hold it up high in the kitchen, the dog looks up at the food bowl, their butt hits the floor, then I pass them a piece of food. The dog thinks, oh, okay. Next time they see me hold that food bowl up high, they sit the butt on the ground, they know that something good is coming. So that's where the behaviour has been positively reinforced. positive reinforcement, the kind of term can be used wrongly sometimes. If somebody says, oh, I tried positive reinforcement and it didn't work, it's a little bit of a misuse of the description, because positive reinforcement is more of a retrospective term. So it's when we see an increase in behaviour. It's when a behaviour is repeated and we've added something to help that behaviour repeat. So we're giving the dogs something nice so that they're going to do that behaviour again. We tend to use food. You can, of course, use toys or anything like that. And this is where we're looking for the behaviours that we want the dog to do. So the joy of positive reinforcement is we're thinking about what we want the dog to do. So instead of don't jump up, don't bark, it's what do we want the dog to do instead? So if every time we go into the kitchen and we head for the dog food cupboard, our dog's jumping like a jelly bean, we need to think, okay, instead of don't do that, stop jumping up. It doesn't really give the dog any information about what we want them to do instead. So we need to think, okay, what would we like them to do? Maybe go to a mat. So if we're walking into the kitchen, there might be a doormat at your back door. So we can teach the dog quite easily using positive reinforcement to instead, when I head into the kitchen and go to the cupboard, they go to that doormat. And they're keeping their paws on the floor whilst they're doing that. And I'm teaching in a way that makes it rewarding for that dog so that they want to go to that mat when I go to the treat cupboard, to the food cupboard, or whatever you want them to do. So thinking about, instead of don't do this, don't do that, it's like, okay, what can I teach my dog to do instead? And how can I do that? And we can use something that the dog likes in that particular scenario to teach them that behaviour. So in the kitchen at home, it might be that I can use a little piece of dried food, and my dog might absolutely love that in that scenario. When I'm out and about and I want to teach the dog to come back to me, or that when they see some other dogs over the field, that they just check in with me first before I ask them to do something else, whether it's to, okay, go play or come this way instead, I might have to bring out roast chicken or some cheese when I'm early in teaching that behaviour. So we need to think about what rewards we're using to make sure it's reinforcing, which means to make sure the dog actually does repeat that behaviour that we want. But all the while, we're focusing on what we want the dog to do. So if we're out over the field, it's not, no, don't look at that dog, or no, don't run after that dog. It's look at me instead. I want to reinforce the behaviour of looking back at me. If I ask my dog to come to me, I want to absolutely heavily reinforce that behaviour. I'm going to use something really good. Make sure my dog knows that coming back to me is the best thing ever, especially when there's other dogs over that field. So we're really focusing what we want our dogs to do. Instead of don't do this, it's do this instead. And I think we can put ourselves a little bit in our dog's shoes when we think about this angle with dog training. Is that if you attend a class, let's sort of come all the way out of dog training and think about a dance class or something like that. So I can't dance for toffee, and I remember joining a Fit Steps class. This was years ago, before lockdowns or anything like that. And if the instructor, every time I put a foot wrong, which was frequent, said to me, no, that's not right, not like this, not like that, I would feel deflated and I just wouldn't want to go back. Whereas if that instructor said, that's it, that's right, you know, that was the correct foot, that's going to make me feel good, and that's going to make me want to go back, and building on those small steps towards me being able to perform that behaviour. And that is what positive reinforcement is about. And training using reward-based training is teaching incrementally what we want the dog to do and making sure it is rewarding for that dog, so they want to do that behaviour. Instead of no, don't do this, don't do that, it's do this, do that, this is what I want you to do. And we are making it rewarding for our dogs. With that in mind, positive doesn't mean permissive. It's not about letting our dogs do whatever they want, as it were. You can have rules in your house, of course. It's your house. It's entirely up to you. Of course, your dog is a member of your family. You can have a rule that that particular member of your furry family is not allowed on your sofa, perhaps. That might be your rule in your house, and that's absolutely fine. We do need to be fair on the dog, of course, with those rules. So if you don't want the dog on the sofa, we need to provide them with plenty of comfortable alternatives. So that might be a comfy bed right by the sofa. Let's say your dog wants to be on the sofa to seek out contact with you, then maybe sit on the floor. near your dog's bed, to give them the option to come and have a cuddle with you if you want to. So although we've got our house rules, we do need to be fair with those rules, of course. Your dog might not be allowed upstairs, for example. Baby gate on the stairs, perfect way to prevent that. So positive training and reward-based training isn't about our dogs just doing literally whatever they want. It is about having those rules, perhaps boundaries, if you want to call them that, in place, and being consistent with that. If your dog's not allowed on your sofa, and I say absolutely fine, we need to be consistent. We can't just say, oh, okay, so one family member lets them on, everyone else is like, no, that's not allowed. And that can become confusing for the dog. So we just need to be clear with what your rules are. You can teach your dog that you give them the cue that means they're on the sofa, so they almost ask permission. And one of my dogs, she puts her chin on the sofa and she looks at me up like this. So come on then. You can teach them that when a certain colour blanket is on the sofa, that means they're allowed on. Or you can teach them that they're allowed on one sofa and not the other. But it's just being consistent with that, of course, and that just helps them to understand. So we're not permissive with positive training, but we do need to be consistent and be fair and help our dogs out as well. So dogs do what works for them. We want to try and make what works for us work for the dog. So it's trying to see through the dog's eyes. And it's a bit like I mentioned with the sofa scenario. It's like, okay, they just want to be comfortable. They want to get on the sofa to be comfortable. Well, they want to get on the sofa to be near you. So, okay, let's make that work for the dog. That's where your comfy bed or you being near the dog will give them that sort of outlet for that comfort or to have that social contact. So we really want to make what's working for us work for the dog, and that sort of goes back to the human society again as well. So we make these rules in our human society of what we expect from our dogs, but we really do want to try and make that work for the dog. And this is where positive reinforcement comes in really well, because if we teach the dogs behaviors that we want, keeping paws on the floor when guests come in, we can make that work for the dog by teaching them to go to a mat and make that really heavily rewarding for our dog. When they go to a certain mat, they're getting little pieces of grated cheese, for example. I mean, fantastic. And then they're going to want to do that more than jumping up the person coming in. In theory, some dogs don't. Some dogs we need to get the roast chicken out for that one. But, for most dogs, that is something that works really, really nicely. So we're trying to make what works for us work for the dog as well. So there are lots of peer-reviewed studies saying about how positive reinforcement is really a great way of training in the sense of the better welfare for the dog. It helps with the dog owner bond. There's fewer risks associated with positive reinforcement training. And there's been found that there's better cue response as well. So that's when you ask your dog to do something, they're more likely to do it. And like I say, we want our dogs to want to work for us. I want my dog to enjoy training. I want to enjoy training. I don't want to tell my dog off, and I don't want to be like, no, don't do that. I remember how that makes me feel when I am in a scenario with an instructor and I'm being told, no, that's not right. That's not right. I want to set my dog up for success. I want to help them. I want to manage the environment so that they are successful. And I want to make sure that when they do behaviors that I like, I'm rewarding them. And I think if you want to think of yourself as your dog's sort of leader, if you want to look at yourself that way, then imagine you're your dog's boss, where you're extremely generous. Be the boss that you would like to work for yourself. I don't really think of myself like that, but if that's the way that you want to frame it, I don't think that's a problem if you think about yourself as somebody being really generous. You give your dogs rewards. You give your dogs a bonus when they do something really, really good. You understand and you can see when they're struggling and you help them out. So if you want to be your dog's boss, then be the boss that you would like to work for. So being that really generous boss that really dishes out the bonuses, and imagine the bonuses are pieces of cheese or roast chicken for that dog. So thinking about it that way is a way you can reframe that kind of approach. So there's lots of peer-reviewed studies out there, and there's some references to the ones that I've just used on the previous slide. It's a very short whistle-stop chat about why I think we should train our dogs and the beauty of positive reinforcement with helping our dogs out, helping make what works for us work for our dog, and really understanding that dogs are doing behaviours often because they're a dog, and just trying to help them out in certain scenarios and think about what works for us, making what works for us work for the dog as well. So yeah, thank you for listening and thank you for tuning in. My name's Louise and I'm based in mid-Essex, and it's my details on the screen there. And yeah, have fun with your dogs basically and enjoy training them. And I think that's what we need to remember. And Michelle did a fantastic talk yesterday about what to look for in a trainer. And what I loved is she said that training should be fun, and I couldn't agree more. Absolutely should be fun. You want to be enjoying training your dog. It's not about telling them, no, don't do this, don't do that. It's about, okay, what do I want you to do? I want to make this fun. I want this to be enjoyable. And I want my dog to absolutely love training and want to do the things that I want them to do. So yeah, feel free to put any questions, comments or anything on the chat. And I will just stop my screen share.
Brilliant. I'm not on mute. Brilliant. And I think you absolutely nailed, like, what is kind, what is fair, what is effective, which is the APDT mantra. You know, is what we're doing to the dog kind? Is it fair to them? Is it fair to us? Are we being kind with people when we train? But mostly, is it effective? So is what we're doing actually working? We're not just shoving cookies down a dog's throat. We want them to learn and be able to learn, and we want to do that in the most effective way. So I think that was a really, really great presentation on the joy of positive reinforcement training, but also why you should train a dog and why training a dog makes life easier.
Absolutely. And I think when we think about what we want the dog to do, that helps us reframe it. When I so often get contacted saying, I don't want my dog to do this, or I want my dog to stop doing that. So we need to think, okay, in this particular scenario, in this environment, what do you want the dog to do instead? And that's what we can then do. Okay, so we're going to now use positive reinforcement to train, or reward-based training to train this new behavior that will hopefully be positively reinforced. The dog does more of that behavior increases because I'm adding something good into that scenario or to that particular dog. And then that is going to help the dog so much more with an understanding of what is expected in that particular scenario. So yeah, and of course measuring that outcome, is it effective? Like you say, we only know it's effective if that behavior is repeated. Does it then the dog then do that behavior under those conditions again? And of course we need to make sure that that is happening and then that's maintained. And Michelle touched on this yesterday, which is training is ongoing and it's something that we do need to continue to reinforce. And I take treats out all the time with my dogs. Every day I take out my poo bags, I take out my treat bag. So it's something I'll never forget, because I'll never forget to take my poo bags out, take my treat bag out with me. And my dogs still get what we might term high value rewards or reinforcers, because cheese and chicken that's left over from many of my one-to-one clients, my dogs are getting that when I take them out for a walk. So, you know, I'm still going to heavily reinforce them for coming back to me, you know, despite they're, you know, one of them's getting on for 7, one's getting on for 12, one's 14. Yeah, they're dishing out the treats all the time. I want to be the person that they want to come running back to all the time when I call them. So and one of my dogs has gone deaf, so I absolutely want to keep that, you know, high rate of reinforcement, if you like, lots of rewards up for him when he's watching my hand signals that I perhaps didn't use so much throughout his life, because he responded to my verbal cues really well. So yeah, absolutely, my dogs even now will still get lots of rewards, and I love doing that. And why wouldn't I? You know, why would I not want to give nice things to my dogs?
Yeah, totally. Laura's got a little question. Let me just see if I can bring it up on the screen. What advice do you give to the people who say their dog is not food motivated, so they can't use food as a reward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it completely sort of depends on that dog. So we'll need to find what motivates that individual dog. And if the dog doesn't want to take food in certain scenarios, we might need to step back and think, okay, is this dog actually not very comfortable in that scenario? Or is it just a dog that's not really bothered about food? it might be that we just need to experiment with different types of food, or that we just need to find something else that's a reward for that dog that reinforces a behavior. It may be that movement is reinforcing for that dog in that scenario, so we can use running and chasing as a reward. We can of course use toys. So it's trying to find what's motivating that dog in that particular scenario. So I think it's always it depends answer. But if it is a dog that is truly not that bothered about food and there's no other concern about that fact, then it's trying to find what's motivating that dog. And yeah, it could be movement, it could be toys, it could be something silly like a crushed plastic bottle or something. They like the noise and they might want to chase that. It doesn't even have to be what we would call a dog toy, you know. So it's and I've used movement and running before as well with some dogs that really like to chase. So I've used that, and that's me running away and them chasing me, and that's been worked out to be quite a nice reinforcer for that particular dog at that particular time.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're always thinking train the dog in front of you and what do they like, and there's also an argument of every dog has to eat, so at some point they've got to eat, and do they find food rewarding? And you might find breeds of dog, particularly I find like breeds like collies, who maybe are not quite so food motivated as other breeds of dogs. So you're looking at, okay, so what do you like? And you're using that, there's always something they're going to find rewarding.
Yeah, my border collie loves cheese. He loves
right,
food just
there you go.
But yeah, absolutely, like you say, looking at that individual, and I think as well, if the dog's really not particularly foodie, we need to always have that potential for there being something else going on in our minds. We need to think, okay, what is there something going on with the dentition? Is there a gut problem? There's always that, and it doesn't matter how much training we do, if there's something medical underlying, we're really barely going to scratch the surface. So really, the dog has to have the all clear from the vets, or we need to potentially be investigating or asking the vets to investigate certain specific things, because maybe the dog's not food motivated because of pain in its mouth. Maybe it doesn't want to eat because that's causing it discomfort. Maybe there's discomfort in the gut. We don't know, and as trainers we can't make any kind of suggestions like that. So this is where we need to work closely with vets, and we need to make sure that the medical side is covered as well.
Great. We've got another question here, which is, I walk a Vizsla who has started to become a little jealous when another pooch comes up to me for attention. He also has a very high arousal when I arrive. I have tried various distraction techniques, but nothing seems to be a consistent solution. Any tips? That's a little bit quick and dirty dog training tips, which might take, we would probably end up asking you more questions about it than we... Any thoughts, Louise?
It's definitely, and it's dependent, isn't it? And breaking down every single little section there into, and what does jealousy look like? Saying, the dog's jealous when another dog, what does that look like? What are the behaviours that you're seeing? And it's very much, and it depends, and probably warrants a whole consult. So I'm not sure that it's something that we can answer on in this forum.
Yeah. Louise does work online, by the way, so she is available throughout the country. If you'd like to do a Zoom consult with her, she'd be happy to answer your questions on there. Nice little comment from Rat Patterson. Quite right, Ted is 11, still gets the sweetie when he comes back. And then why wouldn't he come back? I mean, there is reinforcement history. So, we build up the dog's bank of, if 7 times out of 10 I give you a treat when you come back, when you come back the 12th time, I might not give you a treat or something like that. And it makes that we trick them, we brainwash them, we go into that kind of slot machine style of reinforcement where the dog never knows, am I going to get a treat or am I not going to get a treat? And it's quite important to do that so that you don't get huge amounts of frustration. So going completely wild and a little bit off tangent, but when that killer whale killed its trainer a few years ago, they think it's because the schedule of reinforcement went, do something, have a fish, do something, have a fish. And then this trainer tried to flip it onto do a few things and have a fish, and the animal got so frustrated and so angry and it tipped over into rage and it killed its trainer. And you do see that with dogs sometimes that have always been given treats for every single thing they do, and then suddenly somebody tries to flip that reinforcement schedule and they're like, hang about, I'm not sure what's going on here, and it causes them a huge amount of stress. So I kind of trick dogs a little bit. That's how I work. Do you do anything like that, Louise? So your schedule of reinforcement, I mean, this is owner directed rather than trainer directed, but
yeah, and I think when I'm working with owners, it's not something that I'll sort of talk about too much, and especially with recalls. I think with our recall, there's so many times where we don't necessarily have to think about that, because there'll be a time where I need to get my dogs back now, get them on the lead right now, and I need to walk off, and then I'll get my hand in my treat bag and get the treat out. So that kind of plays into that, really, without me needing to try, because if every time my dogs come back I'm going to get the treats out, so a couple of times it might be that I need to get them back now, get the lead on, and by the time the treat comes out, I've not reinforced the recall, I've reinforced the lead going on and us moving away. So actually, without really having to plan that type of schedule of reinforcement, it happens naturally anyway. So with our recalls, I tend to not worry about it too much. I would rather the dog knew that when it came back to me, it was pretty surefire that it was going to get something good. But of course, for sitting, for example, for butt on the floor, if that's a behavior that you want to teach your dog, of course, we need the food at the beginning, but eventually that becomes a real solid default behavior in certain scenarios. If you practice that, it doesn't mean that we need to feed the dog every time, and we can use that behavior for, and it doesn't have to be a sit, of course, it could just be a stand, 4 paws on the floor, stillness for a brief moment before we open the back door, or before we give a release cue to come out of the car, for example. So it doesn't mean we're always giving treats for behaviors all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And just another little nice comment about mixing up the treats. So we might use kibble, we might use cheese, we might one day use those freeze-dried cat prawns. Thrive. Dogs go absolutely wild for those, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. And variety can be reinforcing in itself as well. So it's not, and sometimes I think about that where if you were like just eating chips all the time, it's like, oh yeah, this is really good, but only to a point, and then it's like, oh, I could do a bit of ice cream now, or so having, I know that's anthropomorphizing a little bit, but having the same thing all the time, it's just nice to have, if you're having savory, having something sweet as well, or just after that. So yeah, variety can be reinforcing. It depends on the individual dog. So when I think of my youngest dog, she's a Goldie Cross Lab, she loves everything, and I could probably just use kibble and she would do all the things that I potentially want her to do, but of course I do mix it up for her. However, my other dogs may prefer the variety, but my youngest dog doesn't seem to really care. So it is knowing your individual dog in front of you.
She's a cheap date. Yeah, that's what we call it, don't we? She's a cheap date, that one, but she still likes the variety. I've had it with a lot of clients where they feed raw to their dogs and they're like, well, I don't know where I'm going to go from here, because I give them beef mince and I give them this, and I'm like, well, give them a bit of kibble and it'll be like McDonald's. It'll be like all their Christmases have come at once, so
my youngest loves the kibble because they're fed raw as well. So yeah, I'll bring out a piece of kibble. She's like, oh yeah, that's different. So yeah, there's very variety playing into that part as well.
Excellent. So yeah, Jackie's just said as well, she always mixes up her treats. Yeah. And what can be really nice actually is if you just get a pot of treats, get a pot and mix a load in together, and then you're almost like playing lucky dip. You're not sure which one you're going to get out for your dog, and your dog doesn't know, is it cheese now? Is it kibble now? Is it sausage now? Is it whatever,
Absolutely. What I've seen other people do, I must admit, I haven't done this myself, but they'll bring out a tray of different types of chews and offer it to their dog. And they're like, what do you want? And the reason I haven't done that, because I think if I did that to Bracken, she would just literally try and take the whole lot in her mouth at once. So I haven't done that. But it's so nice when you see people share the videos of their dog literally having that choice of all those different types of chews. I think that's really, really nice to do that.
Yeah. And having a preference test.
Absolutely, and having options for the dogs to lick, to sniff, and to chew as well. So it's not just obviously this is not necessarily for teaching specific behaviours, but to give the dogs something nice as enrichment. Obviously, a Kong filled with something soft that they can lick, or a licky mat or something like that. Snuffle mat with something that they can sniff, and a chew that they can gnaw on. So of course, thinking about the different variety that they can have to give them something to do as well. And of course, if with our puppies, if instead of their teeth being on your skin or cloves, giving them something to gnaw onto instead, then that gives their mouth something to do.
Totally. Yeah. And we just got some other comments. Jackie said she feeds raw and feeds cheese or cooked chicken, and also dried duck, etc. Yeah, lovely bit of jerky. Sue says trail mix in a bag. I think that's what you call it, maybe, when you mix it all in together. I call it
Yeah.
lucky dip. I don't know why. Rat said Ted would snaffle a lot, like your dog probably, like the Labradors or the Retrievers, just a lot.
Ted's lovely. Ted's a little legend. He is. Love Ted.
Is that one of your clients?
Yeah, Rat's a fantastic trainer. Rat's an APDT trainer. It's a brilliant trainer.
Brilliant. Oh, sorry, I didn't know. Thank you, Louise. Thanks so much for this evening. There's no more comments or questions at the moment. Tomorrow night, we are joined by our APDT chair, Jane Robinson. I need to put my teeth back in, clearly. And she's going to be talking to us about another really important topic around dog training, and that is management. So preventing dogs practice things you don't want them to do by using management techniques. And it's one of the kind of first things we do when we have a dog with any kind of behavioural training problem. How can we manage this behaviour? How can we prevent it from happening in the first place and then train what we want them to do instead? So I'm hoping that we'll get lots of people join in for us tomorrow night, and you'll get to hear and speak to the APDT chair. It'll be more of a Q&A with us talking between each other, ourselves, answering your questions, that kind of thing. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Louise. And I'll see you tomorrow.